Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm responsible for startup programs at the Standortagentur Tyrol. And I'm also the local representative of AustrianStartups now here for Tyrol. And I'm very happy to shape the Tyrolian startup ecosystem.
Hi, I'm Martin. I'm 38 years old. I'm husband, father, and in 2018 I decided to start my own project after working for 15 years in a corporate environment. I founded Monkey together with a friend where I used to work together for more than 12 years in the previous company. And with our startup Monkey, we have the mission to help people to improve their financial fitness by bringing saving and spending money back into more sustainable balance.
Yeah, hi, my name is Matthias Farwick, co-founder and CEO of Txture. We are a company of 16 people now with headquarters here in Innsbruck, one colleague based in Frankfurt. And we have a software platform that helps large organizations to move their IT systems to the cloud and save money, become more agile in transforming to new state of modern IT infrastructure.
I would say, besides having a strong team and being a very passionate team of founders, it's very important to have a very strong community that you can interact and connect with all the other startups, and that you can have the very important peer learning so that you do not do the same mistakes like others have probably done, and that you can learn from them.
Yeah. I mean, the first reflex always is the idea, and of course, the idea needs to have something special. So of course, you need to somehow differentiate from what's already there in the market. But I think what's even more important for startup success is then the execution on the idea, and also how to monetize on the idea, which is sometimes at the digital business model not that obvious on how to monetize them on the community base. And when it comes to execution, then one very critical factor is the team, of course. So finding the right people, especially at the very beginning as a startup, you can't afford spending money on people who can't deliver. So that's why especially kind of the first hires are super, super essential, and also how you are putting together your founding team within the startup. And of course, funding. I mean, there are a lot of digital business models which require funding in order to reach break even. And there, many startups need to already think quite early about how to get access to capital. And last but not least, timing. The best ideas sometimes have very limited value if the technology isn't right or if the consumer isn't right for that.
I think one of the most important things is to have the right people in the team, starting, of course, with the co-founders, but also then with the 10, 20 first people in the team. Another important thing is resilience. I think most startups go through some really rough phases, being it like technical challenges or customer challenges, finding customers, finding funding. And having resilience and fighting through those problems is, I think, is something really important. Next thing is having the right motives. So if the only motive is being fast and getting rich, I think this is in 99% just unrealistic, and one should just stop having that thought. And I think in the last part I would say is timing, because I think it's overrated. If you're agile as a young company and you can, pivot a little bit at least and have a good technical base, you can maybe recover from not so good timing and move to something where you actually have a good timing. So that's not something that should be too much of a problem, too much of a worry if one is an agile company.
I would say Tyrol is very characteristic, especially for three things, and I would like to mention these three things. The first is that the institutions that support startups here work together. So they support startups together to create a strong startup program here in the region. The second point is the work-life balance. Besides being in the middle of the mountain, you can also have a great work-life balance here in the region. And the third thing is, what I think is very important, is what I also mentioned before, is the peer learning effect, that you have a strong community and the possibility to connect with other startups. And this is also something we want to foster in this region, that startups learn from other startups.
I mean, compared to Eastern Austria, of course, it's much smaller, but high quality startup. So the good thing about that is that everybody knows everyone within the scene, and it's really collaborative. So I'm in contact with all my startup colleagues, and we're discussing quite often kind of how we can help each other. There's also a lot of initiatives here in this region in order to really promote the startup world and kind of motivate people to start their own projects, from Startup Tyrol to Junge Wirtschaft to the Inkubator, where we are also part of the program, Werkstätte Watten. So there's a lot of things where startups and founders can get a mentorship, coaching, access to other experts, which is really good. I think the negative point is that access to capital sometimes is a little bit more difficult here in this region, because, I mean, when it comes to talking to investors, it's much easier if you're having kind of a warm contact, if you had the chance to already build some relationship with potential investors. And of course, there are much more investors in Eastern Austria. There are more networking events where you can coincidentally, so to say, kind of meet investors. So I think this is a little bit more difficult here in this region, and sometimes also access to talent, especially with regards to software engineering, because I mean, we have a university here where they're also having an IT department, but there are a few large organizations here who are more or less hiring all those talents. And of course, as a startup, you sometimes can't compete with regards to salary. So that's why a lot of startups here in this region also have to kind of found a kind of more distributed setup and how to manage them their development resources.
Yeah, so I think compared to other large metropolitan areas like Vienna, for example, of course, our startup community is smaller. But I would say there's a tight-knit group of other startups that are in a similar phase to ours. Having something between 15 and maybe 40 people, and already expanding globally. And that's very good, and we exchange a lot in that space. There's a lot of actually help in the area of, I would say, innovation ideation for maybe students that want to seek help to find their business idea and do the first steps for that. But generally, I would say for companies that are in a stage like ours, we are kind of on our own when it comes to the support, because there's not so much support for those kinds of companies that are in a little bit of a later stage. And basically we are on our own there, but it works pretty well, I would say, in terms of helping each other out.
I would like to give you 3 success tips for future founders. The first one is that it's very important to surround yourself with passionate people like you are, that you interact and learn from them and get to know some other motivated people and get to know them. The second thing is that it's very curious to be agile, and that you have the courage to adapt and do something new. And the third thing is always stay passionate, because this is actually what I personally think makes every startup successful, is when you are passionate and when you actually do what you love. So stay passionate.
Yeah, maybe 3 things to say here. So first, of course, it's mission, but then also having focus. I think it makes a lot of sense to think about what could be this minimum viable product in order to really launch as soon as possible, and not spend too much time on refining a lot of things without kind of pushing the product to the consumer and then learn together with your customer if you're on the right track. So that's kind of the first thing. Then of course the right team. I think have a very careful look on who's going to, within the founder team, who are your first kind of hires, especially also within the software engineering area, because I mean, amazing software engineers, they are delivering exponential compared to just average software engineers. So that's really, be careful there. And if you don't have the kind of the experience to judge on who is a good software engineer or not, then ask friends, ask someone who is within this area and can also put together some challenges in order to really find out if this is a good engineer or not. And maybe last but not least, rigorous liquidity planning, especially also now during Corona times where access to capital is a little bit more difficult than it used to be before Corona. You need to have your numbers right. So you need to know how long with the existing capital you can afford to burn money, and when to start kind of getting in contact with potential investors, and not underestimate how long it could take, so that you not just start kind of getting in contact with investors when you need the money, but you need to start the process kicking off much earlier. And I think this is also something where some startups sometimes underestimated the time it could take to kind of convince investors, especially in very, very early phases of the startup.
Trusting the team, trusting your co-founders is, I think, just one of the basic things for success. If you don't trust yourself in the beginning, it's going to get really hard. For example, in our case, so I founded, for example, the company, one of our co-founders is Thomas, with which I work since 2006. So now over 14 years, we're working together at the university, for example, and there's an intense amount of trust. And we know really, really well how the other person thinks, where the strengths are, and maybe where the weaknesses are. And that's something really important. I mean, we were, for example, working together in Hong Kong for some time and staying together in a, I think, 6 square meter apartment for half a year. And I mean, this is a very strong basis for actually doing something cool together.
Here in our region, we are having the very special, unique situation that the institutions that support startups are working together. So we are working together to create a program that should support the startups from the very beginning, from the very initial stage to a later stage, to have a joint power, so to say. The second thing is the region with its unique atmosphere. You're having a good test market, and you're also having the opportunity to have a good work-life balance. And the third thing is the community behind. We're working together, and this is also something we want to further develop in future, is that startups get to know other startups, that they interact, that we can support peer learning, and then also startups create the startup scene and are a very important creator of the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, as mentioned, the scene is smaller but high quality. We're having a lot of really successful startups who did grow quite significantly. And I think the good thing with having a smaller scene is that everybody knows everyone. So we are highly connected, we are supporting each other. That's what I already mentioned. Of course, the visibility is, it's easier getting visible compared to maybe Eastern Austria, where there's a lot of competition also with regards to attention. So I think getting kind of first PR seems to be a little bit easier than when you're at a place where there's huge competition. As mentioned, I think when it comes to managing your fundraising process, you need, of course, be more active with regards to going out and going to the places where you can meet investors, and sometimes this requires travel, but I think this is part of what you need to do as a founder.
Yeah, I would say one of the very good things is that compared to, as mentioned before, some other metropolitan areas, we are not very distracted a lot. So I think in the startup world, you can get distracted a lot by startup events, interviews, and things like this. And here in Tyrol, I think we can focus on the key aspects of what brings us forward. We have, I think, a better situation when it comes to hiring in specific areas. So I think there's not as much competition with regards to maybe finding very, very good developers, of which we are really, really lucky to have such an amazing team. Then on the other hand, there are not so many people here that have experience, for example, selling what we sell. So we sell high-priced software to global organizations. And first of all, there are not so many global organizations here in Tyrol to sell to. And also, there are just not so many people around here that have experience in that area, selling to C-level, selling to CIOs and CEOs. So that's a little bit of a difficulty. So actually, that's the reason why we just hired our first colleague in Frankfurt with a lot of experience in that area. And we are aiming to become more remote on the sales side, but have basically our development headquarters here in Tyrol. And as mentioned before, what's nice is that there are a handful of startups that we can exchange with, that have similar size and maybe also similar problems. But I think around here, what's also important is you can always be a big fish in a small sea. So that's the way to look at it, maybe in the more rural or more smaller cities. So if you're a cool startup in a small city, you are the coolest startup, so to say. And in that regard, there's more competition in big cities. And on the other hand, you can create really cool stuff. You can fill the gaps yourself. So that's something I have done quite a lot in my life. If I see something that is missing in my community, for example, I build it with friends. And just one example here now from the startup community, we are creating a negotiation mountain retreat in the fall. Basically, that's a retreat where we get trained negotiating big deals with large companies. I'm doing that with a former CEO of a large IT company in Germany. And so as negotiation with large companies is not something that many people know about around here. That basically we fill this kind of gap by creating an event where we teach each other those techniques ourselves. And also everybody who's listening, just get in touch if you want to take part.
Here in Tyrol, we are having a mix of branches and sectors of startups. Two of them are, for example, life science or also tourism. What we see now is that it has a lot of advantages when we are having this mix, but what we also see now is Tyrol is very defined for a certain sector, and this is the sustainable alpine tech sector, where we are also focusing on in future.
Yeah, I mean, as mentioned, I used to work for 15 years in a corporate environment, and I really enjoyed that. I had the chance to really grow my career there, but after some time I was always spending quite a lot of my time and energy when I'm doing something, and after some time I realized that I used to work my whole life for someone else, and I also reached a point where I was missing a little the purpose in what I was doing. And especially when I became a father, I took 2 months off and I was going with my wife and my small baby to Australia and New Zealand. We were traveling there with a camper, and there for the first time I had the chance to really go back one step and think a little bit more about what else do I want to do in my remaining life, so to say. And I really developed the need and the urge to do something that gives me more purpose. And this is where I started talking to Christian, and both of us, we shared the passion for finances, and we realized in conversations with a lot of other people that there is a real issue with regards to how we are dealing with money, how much we are manipulated by the consumer industry to buy stuff, and how sick this could also make us. And this is how we came up then with the idea of Monkey. And then it took, of course, some things in order then to really quit our jobs. So there have been kind of strategic changes in the corporate environment where we decided that now it's the right time for us to leave the corporate world and then really start our own project. And we both have been very, let's say, in a good situation that Christian and myself, we are living a quite financially healthy life. So we had the chance to build up financial buffers so that we could also, as being husbands and fathers, really take the risk and quit a good salary job and then go into the more risky startup world, which wouldn't have been possible if we wouldn't have had those financial buffers. So, yeah.
So actually, I always wanted to build a company or something on my own or with friends, and I can remember my dad basically bought me in maybe 1995 or something like that, a magazine. It was called Geschäftsidee. It was a magazine. I think it only had maybe like 4 or 5 issues. And so I still always have this thing in my mind that my dad also always encouraged me to create something myself. And I think he was a teacher, so he was thinking like, I would have liked to do something like this myself. So that's a little bit ingrained. But yeah, I think it's just fun to create something from scratch. And another interesting thing, I think, having studied computer science, is that every generation in the history of humankind basically had some specific phase where innovation was really possible. Like in the 19th century, amazing innovation in electricity or railroad, and then 20th century cars. And we basically in the 21st century now have so many areas where we can innovate in. Early this century, social media. And in our case now, it's the topic of cloud. So what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years is that most of the data will be running with the public cloud services like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and the like. And that's basically what is going to happen. And yeah, for me, it's a lot of fun to be part of this, very drastic change that is going to happen, and that's unavoidable, I would say. And yeah, we're in the middle of this storm right now.
I would say what is needed like this so often is, of course, funding, especially in the later stage. And I'm very happy to say that I know that there are possibilities coming up. So this is something that is important to have funding also in a later stage. The second thing here is the office space. I would say in the very initial phase, there are great co-working spaces, but then when startups grow and needs their own office spaces, it is great when they're having also space for that, especially space that is affordable. And then, of course, I would say it's also very important to motivate especially students and show them the great opportunities they have when they work at startups.